We're back. Yes, back-to-back WeatherBrains episodes. This is WeatherBrains episode number 727, the pre-show. This is for the week of December 23rd, Christmas week, but we're doing it on December 19th because I will be off away on vacation next week. So back to back, we did one last night. We got one going tonight. So how about them apples? Let's see if I can get our guests on here with us. And we are starting at a different time. Of course, we know most people watch this later. We totally understand that. And most people listen. They don't even watch, but that's okay. We do a video version mainly because of the television side. So let's bring in our folks here and see if we can stir up some participants tonight. We can invite Kevin and John and Troy and Nate and Kim and Bill. 2, 3, 4. I think that's everybody. So now the regulars have been invited. And if you don't know what this is, it's the magical time of this program where we share boring personal stories, humorous anecdotes, and occasionally say very, very outrageous things. We have been encouraged by many to do a podcast of the pre-show and call it the pre-show podcast. But if we do that, it would ruin it. It wouldn't be that good, probably. So, and the only people that see the pre-show are the ones that watch on the video side on YouTube. And so there you go. No editing here, man. It's raw. What happens, happens. And I know I need to invite our guests. I just saw a nice note from Kim, who I think is running the shoe tonight. And let's get the emails invited. Oh, good. She's very organized. I have all of the emails of our participants, so we are going to invite them right now. And here we go. All right, that's participant number 1. Here comes participant number 2. And there's one more. Kim is so organized. I see some TV addresses and I see some NOAA addresses on here. All right, so they have just been invited. Kev.
Hey.
Hey, man.
What's
How
going
you
on
doing?
there? I'm okay. How are you?
Good. Thanks for doing a Thursday night special.
Yes, we love the Thursday night special.
At a new date, new time. 7 p.m. Central. I think I've got all of our guests invited. And all of our regulars invited. So maybe it's just me and you. We could do this.
Where's
We've
the
done
audio?
it before.
How do you select your microphone on this thing again?
Lower left, where it says mute, there's a little up arrow, and you click on the little up arrow, and you can pick your source.
Yeti. I didn't have it plugged in yet.
The Yeti. So everybody should have their email by now. So in theory, just magically, everybody's just going to start showing up. And if not, we had a deal a couple of weeks. We had a deal a couple of weeks ago. This is like 3 weeks ago. It was like 2 minutes before showtime, Monday night, usual time. I was the only guy here. I mean, nobody, no guests, no regulars, nothing.
Yeah, I came in on the tail end of that show. That was an interesting.
Yeah, you came in, and then Aubrey came in. She was the first one to recognize the panic in my eyes. Even though I know in my heart I could carry a 2-hour podcast with no problem, but she saw the minor panic and she joined, and some others joined, and we made it happen. So
yeah, in fact, I'll have to. Yeah, I may have to go early because I have to do Fox. So
we should be through by then.
Cody Berry is in the house.
Kim Cloco's in the house.
Hello, hello.
Hey.
It was just like we just talked here. Just
Right. Yeah, man.
I mean,
Almost like it.
of course, we're not going to see each other until almost the new year. Cody, can you hear us okay?
I can. Can you hear me okay?
Loud and clear. Nice. So, Kim, I've invited all of the email addresses that you gave me, and hopefully they will be able to figure this out.
Yeah, agreed. I apologize on this since I know these were sort of invites that Kevin had originally made and he's walked away, but I hadn't been in touch with them since. So I think that they understood that this was the right time and everything. So we'll just wait patiently, I guess, and see.
Yeah, and there's no pressure because we're not on television. This will air on television Monday night of next week, but there's no, they'll take the recorded version. So
Great.
No pressure on the TV, so we can be a little laid back here. So
Does that mean we can swear and stuff?
Go ahead. Just cuss to your heart's desire. I could play some soundboard stuff.
Ooh, yeah, you should, because I don't think Cody has gotten to hear all of the fun sounds and whiz bang we have with the show.
Now, the minute she hears this stuff, she's out of here. She will hang up in a moment.
Cody's now feeling like her in-laws have shown up with their vacation slides from Tijuana.
Golly. I see some college fight songs in here. Let's see. Anybody know this one? So what song is that? Anybody know?
I don't know off the top of my head.
That's a college fight song.
Right. It sounds like it's from the South. From where?
Penn State. Penn State. Yes.
Man, I'm ashamed of myself. I should know the Big Ten ones.
Well, let's see if you know this one. Come on, it's about to get really good. Hang on. Here it comes.
It's a very creative song. It has a lot of depth.
I love that song. That's one of my favorite college fight songs. Wait. So John just joined us. John, let's see if you know this fight song.
Is that the Packer fight song?
No, Penn State.
Oh, I don't know Penn State. I know Packers.
Does the Packers get a song? I didn't know they had songs.
They do have a fight song. It's pretty funny. It talks about cheese.
Really?
Oh yeah.
Wow.
So many show titles.
Hey, I got to tell you, I made it through O'Hare Airport twice without a delay. Can you believe that? In middle of the snow.
Wow.
No way.
Amazing.
It's big.
That's
huge. It'll never happen again in my lifetime.
Never. Nope, never.
So I'm seeing a phone input here. Who do we have on the phone with us?
Oh, well, let's do a search for the phone number.
Can 781 that number hear us?
Yeah, this is Denise.
Okay.
Hooray! Welcome to the show, Denise.
Hi. Thank you.
Hi, Denise. It's Kevin.
Hello. I'm just trying to figure out this thing.
Are you trying to figure out the video part?
Yeah.
Okay.
Pressure's on now. Okay. You're in TV.
Yeah, I mean, you're a television person. You should immediately know how to get video going here.
There it is.
There you go. Bingo. We have a winner. Ding, 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 ding.
Can you hear us all right?
I can ring my bell.
Whoa.
And if we get Kat in here too, we'll have the full Brady bunch.
Yeah, that's right.
So Denise, can you hear us on your iPhone?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. So we're getting your audio via phone and your video.
Wait, what?
separately, but that's okay.
Two different video
I-
windows.
Yeah.
Not to get too technical now, okay?
Yeah.
So I'm not doing it right.
Denise is so important. She needs two inputs into this.
Two inputs. We have one box for your
Wait.
video, one box for your audio. It looks like you've made a phone call to us.
Yeah.
Your audio's
Yeah,
on
I
a
did
phone
that.
call.
Wait a sec.
And I
Okay.
think
I do
if you
this
hang
all
up,
the
if
time.
you hang up the phone call, we can get your audio via the other method here.
Yeah.
And
Huh.
there we
Oh,
go.
yay.
Now yes.
Hey.
Bingo. We have a winner.
Yay.
Ding, 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 ding. So we're missing one person, right?
Yeah, Kat Taylor was the other participant that Kevin had invited. And Kevin, had you heard from Kat that she was able to make it? Had you ever heard a confirmation?
I never did. I started this process and then life got weird and I bowed out and Bill took over and then I think you kind of took over and so I never heard.
Okay.
Well, I think I saw something go by that said she was, but I don't have to go back and look. But I kind of got off the grid for a while.
Okay.
Well, let's just start. I mean, let's just roll it here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so let's get the recorders going here. And here we go in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Yes, it's the most marvelous, wonderful, magical time of the year, the Christmas edition of WeatherBrains. This is WeatherBrains episode number 727 for December 23rd, 2019. We are here on Christmas Eve, and a little secret, we're actually here on December 19th doing the Christmas Eve show. So that's the deal. We do this every year. We go early. So thank you. And we're doing this on a special time, special date. But I will be on vacation Christmas week. Many of us will be. So this is going a little early. But I do see that Kevin is back. Kevin, we have missed you. I know that you've had some issues in your family, and we are so sorry for your loss. And
thanks very much. Yeah, my mother-in-law passed away not long ago. Thankfully, she went quietly and in her sleep and not uncomfortable. So we were grateful for that. Your soundboard's gotten off again. Your audio's overwhelming the compressor. So
yeah, it's
barely
a
hear
very
you.
Odd thing. So you can barely hear my voice.
I assume it'll come back, but yeah, when you hit that music, it dampened everything, and we can barely hear you now.
Yeah, great. Well, you might have to run the show then. So what's going on? How you do?
Well,
give me a great excuse just to sit back and not say anything.
Way to go, Kevin.
Great.
Way to go.
Yeah, shouldn't have said anything.
Well, interestingly, I can hear you fine. You're a little bit softer than you had been, but I can actually hear you just fine.
He's coming back a little bit. Let's just go on. It'll all work out in the end.
There's this internal compression routine with these services that it just can't handle some of the stuff we do here. So, and the audio sounds normal on the audio podcast version. So anyway, but welcome back, Kevin. Dr. John is in the house. You've been traveling, and you say you actually went through Chicago O'Hare twice with no delays.
Can you believe that? Yeah, the snow that came through actually stayed just to the south. So I was able to experience some sub-zero wind chills while I was out there, which, it's no great shakes for Illinois. That's typical for them, but it was a nice little introduction to winter. And we've had already our share of ice here. When my wife drove me to the airport earlier this week, the storm system that unfortunately, Jane, brought the deadly tornadoes to the south brought some ice here to Pennsylvania. So we were driving to the airport. I'm looking at the trees and they're looking white. So we've already had our little share of ice here.
Are you sure you actually weren't in Des Moines and just didn't know it?
That could be, they look quite the same.
I mean, the airport.
No, it's not the same airport. That's for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah, that's for sure.
So
Like
last
planes, trains, automobies. Welcome to Wichita. Yeah.
So we were flying back in on final approach last night into Harrisburg, and I'm thinking, okay, we're on through the, not quite the core, but through that's pretty strong winds, the mid levels of the atmosphere. So we had an incredibly fast flight from Chicago. But I'm also thinking, all right, we're going to have to turn into that jet to make final approach, right? So I'm looking through down the aisle of the aircraft, which is doing this. And I'm thinking, how many of those little bags are going to start dropping now from the seats?
Ooh.
Not a one. I was really impressed. Not a one.
Well, we're glad you made it, John, and welcome back. And
Thanks, dude.
Troy, you through with your academics for the year? Or are you still working?
At 12:37 Central Time today, I hit the transmit button on final grades in GRT 301. So that finally, and I've had people, and I won't go into this, but too much, but I've had people reach out and ask me today, I need to meet with you tomorrow about this. They didn't meet with me during the semester. Kim, you know about this, all of a sudden the day of the final, all of a sudden people, what's this all about? So I've got one more office hour set tomorrow at noon, then I'm going to start drinking. So,
and that's your show title.
Right there.
Yeah. All right. Well, Dr. Kim Cloko McLean, I'll let you bring in our guests. I can't wait to hear this episode. It's going to be a good one tonight.
Great. Wonderful. Thank you. Yeah, we're really excited tonight to have some guests who are going to talk to us about activities in the hazardous weather test bed, especially the broadcaster experiment. So first, I'd like to welcome Denise. You were one of our participants in the program. Could you just tell the audience a little bit about you? What's your background? And honestly, what brought you to apply to our test bed?
Hello, my name is Denise Isaac. I'm currently in Boston. I am originally from Panama, the country. I came to the US to study meteorology, so it's been a wonderful experience. I decided, actually, this was my third time applying to be part of one of the experiments. And I just wanted to be part of it, see what it was all about, and also give my perspective. Being that I'm a bilingual meteorologist, I wasn't sure how many Spanish-speaking meteorologists had been part of the process yet. So I just wanted to kind of give my perspective on that side of the, spectrum.
Yeah, it was wonderful to have you for that. And thank you so much for coming, for sticking with it and applying several times. It is a very competitive process, I know. So we're very glad to have had you. And it turned out to be that this was the perfect year to have the bilingual focus, because we, as friends of the show know, if you were here for the show with Joseph Trujillo, we have an interest in trying to develop Spanish language translation services across all the different kinds of technologies and communication platforms the Weather Enterprise has to offer. So thank you so much for coming, and we'll talk a little bit more about your thoughts on the experiment and how everything went in a moment. But I'd like to introduce now our second guest, Dr. Cody Berry. Cody works with me at the lab, and Cody wears many hats, and I'll let you describe, Cody, all the hats you wear, from facets to acting testbed executive officer to your role in the broadcast experiment. But welcome, Cody. Tell us a little bit about your background and all those hats.
Thank you. So for about a decade, I was the Sea Grant liaison to the National Severe Storms Laboratory. I don't know if many are familiar with Sea Grant. If you are familiar with Land Grant, it's an ocean version. It's been around since, I think, the 60s. I'm doing a really bad job of wearing my Sea Grant hat, but as part of that position, I wanted to become more involved in NOAA's hazardous weather testbed. And so I just started getting invited to different meetings with the testbed, and one of them was the probabilistic hazard information one. And it was also the first year that there was funding to bring in a broadcaster a week, and there wasn't a whole lot of vision for what could be done with them, because as having done a summer internship with Bruce Jones in Topeka as an undergraduate, I had the most broadcast experience out of all of the research involved with the project. So it kind of got handed to me. And then my colleague, Holly Obermeyer, who actually has 10 years in broadcasting, ended up being in that room with me for 3 weeks. And at the end of it, we decided it could be so much more than what it was that year. So we just decided to make it our own. Since then, I have also taken on a part-time position overseeing all of the activities in NOAA's hazardous weather testbed. And then starting in August, I switched over from a university position to a federal position, and I'm the facets program lead for the lab now.
Wow.
Ooh, wow.
And I'm gonna back out of this for a second to tell you about what Cody and what Kim do, because I've had the chance to be. They, for some reason, made the mistake and invited myself and Kevin Clazel to one of the test beds a few years ago, and the test beds never have been the same. But no, let me tell you what Cody and what Kim do, and I know we have broadcasters out there that watch us on WeatherBrains. Folks, you ever have an opportunity to do this, the work that these people do is amazing. I mean, I didn't know what to expect when I went up there, and I learned so much, and I've got to hand it to Cody, to Kim, and all of their colleagues up in Norman, because it really is amazing. And I'm sure Denise will talk about this as well, but these are some special people there in the Brady box. Brady family box is over there and there. So got to tell you, y'all do a really good job with this.
Thanks so much, Troy. I really appreciate your comments, and having you and Kevin together, working side by side in our for our emergency management portion of the test bed that year was a real treat. The audience can only imagine.
Can I get that in writing, Kim?
Sure thing. Sim's letterhead. Troy is a real treat. Signed, Kim.
Okay.
Coming your way. So, yeah, thank you for that, and thank you, Denise and Cody, for those introductions. So, as you can tell from the way Cody was describing it, this has been a process that's been evolving over the course of the last several years, and especially in the broadcast experiment, it's really to Cody's credit and Holly's that they made it something. They've worked year after year to make it a more realistic environment for broadcasters. So, Cody, I'm wondering if you can describe for a moment, and we'll come back to Denise and see what feedback she has on this, but I'm wondering if you can describe what all you've done in the broadcaster experiment and what it is you're trying to accomplish there. What is it that you're researching specifically with those broadcasters?
So essentially with probabilistic hazard information, it's such a paradigm shift from what the current operational products are from the Weather Service that the broadcasters receive, that the only way to sort of figure out, would broadcasters use it? Is it useful? How would they communicate it? Where is training needed? What communication problems might we run into? What technological problems might we run into? Is to essentially set up a mock television studio, get a live feed of data from the hazardous weather test bed, and essentially throw it at them and say, okay, pretend that you are at work. We have you mic'd up, we have a camera, do what you would normally do. So if they would break in during programming or break in during commercials, we actually ask them to do that. If they would go wall to wall, we ask them to do that. And then we take notes. And this actually started with the hope that if we paid attention to what decisions were being made and what the probabilistic values, the probability of a tornado occurring with this storm, or the probability of severe wind and hail occurring with this storm, that we might start to see a trend as to, what thresholds were triggering decisions. That was the initial vision. And now it has evolved into, there is no magic number. And how do we create a product suite that works and makes sense for broadcasters?
That's great. Thank you for that that overview. And Denise, you've gotten to come into the testbed after this couple of years of development, refining all those questions, and you were sort of thrown in front of this tool, the probabilistic hazard information tool. When you were first exposed to this tool, tell us about your impressions of it, and just generally, you got to get a glimpse in where the weather information and warning system may be going. Tell us about how the week went and what you thought of that.
So at first it was overwhelming because there were so many products, right? The fee, the plume, the probability. And at first I was like, wait, it's 3 of them, not just one. So then they will ask so did you make the call of the tornado warning because of the probability or because of the plume, and I was like, wait, I didn't know there were two different things. So the first day was overwhelming because I didn't know there were three different, categories per se that we had to focus on. So after that, I decided to turn off the probability percentage because that one wasn't really giving me the opportunity to cover the storm in a realistic way. So then I started using more of the fees and the plume. So that one really helped me out quite a bit. And then we had tornadoes and severe thunderstorm warnings on. But then I realized that once a tornado popped up, we completely forgot about the severe thunderstorm warning aspect of it. So, so it was just toggling on and off and trying to figure out which one is more important. And of course, if you have a tornado warning, you cover that pretty much wall to wall because that's the one that's very dangerous, and whoever's living in the path could be hit by a tornado. But I found it really fun to deal with the plume because it just narrowed down the area that was really being impacted. Like right now, tornado warnings are the polygon, right? It includes a lot of people that aren't really in the path of the storm, but this plume really just lets us know where the tornado could be, especially with the forecasters really pinning down on where the rotation is. So then the plume, for those who, haven't been part of it and don't know, so it kind of goes from like a deep red to then like a pink, and it kind of degrades in color. So when it's red, deep red, that's where the tornado is. So you will really focus down on the cities that the tornado is headed towards. And because it's a threat in motion, then it moves. So that if the tornado actually was moving northeast at first, but then eventually took a wobble to the south, this plume will also indicate what's happening, what's changing. So I thought that was fascinating. The real life aspect of it was real life, because I know Cody and Holly, they were like, it's okay. You just do what you have to do, but it's not for real. So you don't really have to, make it seem like it's real. But when you kind of get into the character, you start talking like you are a meteorologist on air, warning people that a tornado is headed your way. And I had to cover one of the tornadoes in Dayton, and that we went for like an hour, 45 minutes of just nonstop talking. And I felt like I worked harder that week than I usually do on a regular weekday here at work. It was just so tiring. It was just like, wait, 2 hours already went by. But it was just a really awesome experience.
Yeah, thank you. You've described really well the information that we're putting before these end users, before broadcasters in the broadcast experiment, and before emergency managers in the emergency manager experiment is really dense.
Hey, Kim?
Yeah?
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but before we get too far away from Denise's comments, can you guys define plume from you and Cody?
I was just about to do that. So,
okay, thanks.
The information being really dense, there's a couple different components to it that I'll try to clarify. One part of it is we've taken warnings instead of being these polygons that are, just sort of a patchwork quilt. A warning's been issued, then sometime later another one's issued downstream. We're experimenting with having warnings that actually move and follow the storm, and so you can imagine it's this fluid feature that can update perhaps every couple of minutes instead of so more like on the order of 2 or 3 minutes than how frequently they update now, every 15 to 20. So you get to see more of the motion that way. And at the same time, underneath that, we can have a plume of probabilities that live sort of underneath the warning, and that can, in some sense, for the tornado case, it does refine closer to the storm. This is the area of the storm specifically that's rotating. It can be a little bit more refined, but the plume itself can actually extend out to an hour and give information ahead of the storm that sort of falls between the watch and the warning scale. So the idea behind it is maybe you have populations like we were talking about on previous shows, like mobile and manufactured housing populations, that people who need to flee, if it's the warning, that is too late to do it. But if you have something that's coming your way where you're starting to get included in this plume of probabilities up to an hour out, you can start to think, oh gosh, this could be heading my way. and it's not quite a warning yet, but you could see things ramping up, and make that decision for yourself. So we're trying to give information in a scale where there just isn't anything right now, but doing something better than just saying, let's make warnings that are super long, because you don't want to just warn a huge area. Your false alarm, population is going to just skyrocket. So this is a way for forecasters to give that sort of shades of gray in their confidence, but hopefully extend the timeline for protective decision making. So the task before broadcasters then is pretty tough. They have to communicate about what Denise was talking about, there being this plume of probabilities, and there's a warning that's separate from it. And we even had something that circles like the current storm location called a storm object. So there were 3 unique attributes that she had to toggle on and off and play with. And, when you're on air, it's a tough time to sort of figure that out, but there's no better way to do it than baptism by fire. Now, interestingly enough, we've had Aubrey join our show. Hi, Aubrey. Aubrey actually was a participant last year in the Broadcasters Experiment.
Yes. Was it already last year?
Can you believe? Yeah, it was. Yep.
Yeah. Sorry for being a little bit late, and they're about to do something apparently here in the studio, so we may have to yield back to me because are you guys going to be a few minutes? Apparently they're going to be 1 minute. So if you can give me 1 minute, I'll let them record, and then I'll hop back in and we'll answer the question.
You tell them who you are. Come on now.
Before she gets in, Cody, can you do this? Can you tell us what has changed in between the time that Aubrey was on and the time that Denise got there?
So actually a lot has changed. Surprisingly, because we switched the platforms that we were testing with. So when Aubrey participated, we were working with data that was developed in what's called the feed prototype. It is a web tool that's designed to sort of mimic WarnGen and an AWIPS display. But because it's a web tool, it allows the developers to do rapid prototyping, sometimes even making changes within an experiment week. And so she was seeing these probability plumes that I sort of liken to the probabilistic wind graphics that the National Hurricane Center puts out, just on a smaller scale. That's pretty much what they look like. So she was seeing those with the traditional National Weather Service warnings that were issued for the cases that she worked. So those were, updating every 15 to 20 minutes, depending on where things fell relative to county warning area boundaries. There may have been some overlapping, whereas what Denise saw was what we have coined threats in motion, which is essentially a rapidly updating warning polygon that moves with the storm, but the size of it is more on scale with that probability plume.
So what you're saying is after Aubrey left, you had to change everything. I'm just kidding. This is, we love you, Aubrey. Her mic's muted, so I can say whatever I want.
That's good.
But your mic is not.
It's probably too early to ask this question, but I know you guys are thinking about it in the back of your minds. But this is going to be, this is going to be a lot of information. Kim has used the term fire hose. What are you guys thinking about as far as, once you lock it down, teaching us and others how to use it?
So initially, it would sort of be a stepwise implementation within the Weather Service. So, right now the Weather Service is already issuing warnings. So the first step would be to try to transition that rapidly updating warning to the Weather Service first. So,
we don't get the visuals that Denise got to see in the first step.
That would be a later step.
Okay.
So it would be more of a stepwise transition as opposed to sort of what Denise and Aubrey went through, where it was just like, here's everything all at once, learn it in one day. You're on the air.
And another question that's too early to answer, but so how long will it be before broadcasters get to see some of this stuff?
I mean, if they apply to participate in the experiment, they can see it as early as next year.
I mean, operationally. Again, not a fair question, but 2 years, 5 years, 10 years?
I would have to guess 5.
Okay.
The answer is always 5. It's 5 years away.
Oh, okay.
It's always
Okay.
5. So check
Cody-
back with
but
us in
Cody
3 years.
and-
It'll be 5 years.
Yeah, Cody and Kim, in a way, this is not a small thing, because the Weather Service right now, as Kevin and James and Dr. John and Aubrey and all of us know, I mean, the warnings are basically text at this point. Everything is a text product, really.
Mhm.
And as I understand it, in my time that I got to spend with y'all, I mean, this is going to go from an interactive graphical product, which will update, as Kim pointed out, very regularly. And that's a huge step to get, I guess, from that text to these sort of things, I guess. And
It
I mean,
is.
and again, like Denise said, and even in Aubrey, in the time that I was amazed by what I saw that y'all have done with the graphics and the way it's presented and all that sort of thing. And I can see where Denise said, okay, I've got to cut a little bit of this out. This is really kind of overwhelming. Let me pick what I think I can tell the story best with. But it's truly amazing, the graphics work y'all done. And I'm hoping we can move forward with some of that.
And we've talked about this a couple of times, but Denise, I've said this, I think James said the same thing. You know, when I got to watch over your shoulder a little bit and see some of this stuff a few weeks back, I walked out literally 50% excited and 50% terrified. Having dealt with it more, what is your perspective on sharing this information? And it looks like it's going to be 10 years before we do, so I'll be retired by then. But what is your and Kim even said it's scary. How terrified are you of the Facets material?
I'm terrified depending on who gets hands on it, because I know that the question they kept asking, like, how comfortable you feel if the public gets a hold of this, and I wouldn't feel comfortable about the public getting a hold of the information, because it's so complex and there's so much to it that if a meteorologist has to take a while to really digest the information, I feel like the public just wouldn't know. Or let's say, they're in the plume and all of a sudden they're not, they will kind of be like, oh, okay, I'm out of the plume, but not knowing that's a threat in motion, that anything could change, then all of a sudden it changes, it goes your way. And then the public will be like, wait, but I was out of it for 5 minutes. How did I get back into it?
Well,
so,
Denise, let me ask you a question, Denise. How well do you think in when you kind of cut back and decided what you were going to use, how comfortable do you feel like the viewers that would have been watching you at that time would have been able to understand it? Because I know you're not where you are, because you can tell a story and you can tell that weather story. Do you feel like successfully did that in your prototype broadcast?
I did. I mean, I liked it a lot. Like, I really liked the plume aspect of it. And like Kim was saying, there are 3 different layers. I just focused on the warning one that would move. So the threat in motion one. And I really felt comfortable with it, because it was just pinpointing like each city. And it was just like, it gave you wings, because you could say like, okay, this tornado is headed to Dayton, I-75, headed your way, it's headed towards the airport. So if you live in this location, so it just gave you those wings that right now with the polygons, you're kind of like, well, maybe if we're following this correctly, if we're following this rotation and rock correctly, maybe it's headed here. You don't say maybe, of course, you just go with it. But I feel like the plume just gave you those extra wings that you need. And it was also very cool that we could communicate through NWS chat with the forecasters and with the emergency managers at the same time. So that helped. But once again, like several cases, I had to do it by myself. So that part was tricky, because reading NWS while covering a tornado on air, not that much fun. But when you had one on the computer and then the other person on air, that helped a lot too. And forecasters were able to tell you why they thought this storm was intensifying, or why it was decreasing in intensity, and maybe they will drop the warning. So that was pretty cool as well.
But it sounded like it gave you a certain amount of confidence, right, Denise?
Yes,
Okay.
It did. A lot of confidence. I mean, a lot. Once I understood all the different layers, that came day 3. Then I was like, okay, I got this.
Cody, go back to the baseline. This was an actual event that she's being served that was in Dayton. And so you're using archive data and running it through the new
models.
Correct.
Okay.
So let me ask you. Look, I need to. How do you get signed up for this thing, Kim? I mean, come on. I mean,
We've got to get
you
James in it.
you need me out there in this thing.
You do.
You get the
So-
email.
so-
Friends there, James. That's good.
So
Show everyone how it's done.
So
Be amazing.
John made a great point here in the chat, and it was going to be one of my questions. I know that the hip buzzword right now, it's probabilistic. Everything's going to be probabilistic when it comes to the warning system. But look, where I am every day in the summer, the probability of precipitation is 20%. Every afternoon in the summer, they're 30%. And I'd say that 80% of the people don't understand what that means. We're having a
Great.
hard time.
Yep.
We're having a really hard time communicating probabilistic information when it comes to daily forecast. And John, your
Absolutely.
point is, John mentioned your point here with the NHC products. It's the same deal.
Yeah, that uncertainty envelope that the Hurricane Center puts out is probably the most poorly understood and misused product that's available. And we're dancing around, as you were saying, James, the notion of probabilistic forecasting and probabilistic outcome. I don't think the public is ready for this. So they'd get their hands on this information and probably misuse.
Well, one thing too, keep in mind, folks, we're talking about probabilistic information, James, with rainfalls of 20 to 30% probabilities in Alabama and a hurricane or a tornado event. We're talking about completely different outcomes here. If that 20% chance of rain, you get wet outside James's house. But these other cases, when you've got the tornado in a relatively small area, this is life or death. But I also have to agree with John too, that here it's the same way with the hurricanes as well. And and we're still sitting there. I think a lot of people scratching their head over that. I agree with John.
Well, I remember when I did the test bed, the first day when you're literally thrown into this, and you're you know, I mean, I come from a non-severe weather market. I did more severe weather coverage in the 5 days out in Oklahoma than I have in probably my entire career, and probably more than what I will do in the next 10 years. So, but that first day, you know, I'm working with a probabilistic product. So when you're on air in these mock scenarios, I'm using probability, probabilistic, and using those words. And I'm going back to the hotel afterwards, and I'm like, that's doesn't sit right with me. Am I communicating this the best way? And I think the question for me throughout the process was, how do we communicate these new products? What's a golden word to use? You know, are we talking about this is where the likelihood of the worst damage of the storm is, you know, this is where our best confidence that, you know, the tornado is with this storm. So it's kind of trying to figure out, how am I going to communicate this to the public? And at the same time, when it comes time to roll out, and I think this is the scary part, when it comes time to roll this out at whatever point we do, what kind of shock factor is that going to set? A complete, you know, this is quite a different product.
It's very different.
And let me say this too, Kim. I was going to say, I want to make it perfectly clear. I love change. You know, a lot of old cranky guys like me and Kevin. Yeah, hey, you know,
y'all.
We've always done it this way. I love change. I love the concept of facets. I absolutely love it. I don't want you to get me wrong, but I'm just concerned about the probabilistic thing and how people understand that.
It's entirely understandable to be concerned. I do think it's important to highlight why those two products you highlighted, the probability of precipitation and the hurricane cone, have faced difficulty, because there's been some research into why is it that the public and even some forecasters don't understand what these products are. There's been research that's shown that the Hurricane Center, there are different individual forecasters there that have different ideas about what they're trying to convey through the cone. So that is a difficulty. What really is underneath that isn't so much the concern that people can't understand the number part. What they're not getting is what's called the reference class of the probability. They don't know it's, 20% chance of what. So for rainfall, they don't know that it's on days like today, it rained 20% of the time. They don't think of it as a climatology definition or a day definition. They might confuse it and think that it's a percent of the day. It'll rain 20% of the day, or it'll rain over 20% of the area. And those are reference class errors. It's not about that they can't process the 20% part. It's that they can't process the of what part. That part is unclear. And the same problem exists for the cone. People don't think that it's a statistical property, that there's a best guess track line, and the envelope is really about our historical track error. The 66% of the last 5 years worth of track error is captured in the cone. They don't think of it as a climatology derived error. They think it's about the error endemic to that particular storm and just how much uncertainty we have about its movement, which is not what it is. It's not a dynamic representation, in other words, or in an ensemble of models is showing spread. It's actually a statistical climatological definition, and that is the exact same issue with POP. They're both these statistical abstractions that really even meteorologists struggle to understand. And they were created because they incorporate error in a way that meteorologists find nice. It's us saying, well, how good have we been in the past at actually trying to predict this, which developers find convenient. But it's not something that anyone who listens finds convenient or natural to understand. So,
and that's the thing is, what do we use? Do we use what makes sense to us, or do we use what makes sense to the public?
I think it needs to be what makes sense to the public.
Exactly, because that's who's going to be using these products. Even with percentage of precipitation, I use what I think the public will infer best. If it's meteorologically incorrect, that's perfectly fine.
So go ahead, Denise.
This is what I kind of use so I can describe the plume better. I drew something here. Can you see it?
This is fantastic. Outstanding.
Yeah, so the plume didn't really have numbers. Those are the ones I turned off. So then the deep red will be where the tornado is and where it's headed, right? So let's say the tornado is right. Wait, let me draw it. Here, tornado. Maybe. Okay. So tornado is there, down there, and then it's headed in the direction north, right? So then that's why it's deeper red. Then the lighter red, you'll kind of tell your viewers like, okay, you're not in the deep cone or cone of uncertainty or cone of, not cone of certainty, but the danger zone right now. But the lighter red shows that you may be in this danger zone in the next 20 minutes. So it's time for you to, kind of get ready and head to your basement whenever I give you the heads up. And then the pink will show you an area that, it could be there in the next 30 minutes or so. So start preparing yourself. So that's,
I'm gonna screen share. I found a tweet and I think that might work a little better. Does that work a little better?
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
So that's kind of the fee in motion. I'm assuming that's from this year. Yeah, it is from this year.
Yep.
So that's a little different than when I was working on it.
Yeah.
But the same concept generally.
And my question to Kim is do we take one of those outer rings and use that as a mobile home trigger? If you live in a manufactured home, you go now if you're in the pink zone or the whatever cone. I mean, is that something we can use in this application?
I think so. Oh, sorry, I think someone else was going to chime in, but I think that would be a terrific idea. Was John, were you going to say something to that, or?
Just to follow up, Kim, when you're done.
Mm-hmm.
One of the risks that I see with a product like this, those of us are well versed in interpreting this information, but someone who is not is going to look at a particular color or a shade of color and say, I'm outside that shade of color. There's no concern for me. Yet what they're misunderstanding is there's a probability that outside that shaded area, there is a risk to you and to your location. And it can be misinterpreted.
Mm-hmm. That's one of the, that's going to be one of the challenges, I think, with this is any spatial representation is going to have to reckon with, do we incorporate the entire envelope of what's possible or some subset of it? Sort of what the Hurricane Center is trying to do and having, a cone that's a subset. I think that they've done, some early modeling studies that had shown if they did the whole thing, that the cone would just be unwieldily large. So in this case, the feature about this that I think makes it a little bit, at least more natural to understand, is that it's not about historical track error. This is a true dynamic representation of the uncertainty endemic to this storm.
Right.
And so it should be wider. The forecaster can make it wider too, but the algorithm that recommends the creation of this product to the forecaster can be wider if the uncertainty is greater. This is something that can be manipulated, and it's supposed to be about the attribute of the storm. And it just that piece, I think, makes it a little bit easier to understand on a sort of base level. But you're right, we have these issues to deal with. Well, what happens if you're on the fringe of this thing? And what happens if it wobbles and goes in and out? This is actually a concern the Hurricane Center has too with their cone. And they actually have an informal policy internally where if the cone, if they might shift it just a bit, they kind of hold off on that unless they have a strong reason to do so or high confidence that the track is shifted. They really want to avoid what's called the windshield wiper effect, where you can have the hurricane go hither, thither, and back and forth. That had shown, had proven to, especially emergency management partners, to be extremely frustrating. And so we're kind of in a similar situation, but on a very compressed time scale. And we're not sure what to do about that question just yet. We are hoping to, we have a proposal in to study that and to see if we do better to do something like what the Hurricane Center does and to constrain the wobble to some extent, develop some rules for it. Because you're right, John, we're heading straight into some of those similar issues, and we don't yet know if the public would infer, even if they're on the edge, if they'd infer that they should still pay attention, or if they'd read that as a sort of hard boundary. It's a very good question.
So my next question, Kim and Cody, I have reason to believe that a large percentage of people that consume my products and services cannot find their house on a map. So we're going from text warnings to graphical warnings with maps. What do we do about that?
Do most people read text warnings?
That's a good point.
They don't, because again, typically the way it works, and as y'all know, this is a very aggressive severe weather market here. We do this a lot. And I have never, to my knowledge, I say never, maybe when I was in high school and working at a radio station, but I have never actually taken the text of a National Weather Service warning and read that word for word. I just take snippets of that when I'm doing the long form coverage. And, but I do show graphics, maps, and I love this concept, but I'm telling you, and I will be there to call out Walmarts and barbecue joints and farms and these places that people understand, but people will consume these products and services where they don't have me to do that. And I just worry about maps. And I honestly think we have a geography literacy problem in this country.
Oh, no question. No question.
Yeah.
And so, I'm just saying, y'all,
James,
it's something we have to think about.
But that's something you do so well, though, James. I would think that I mean, I've seen your coverage and I've seen you do that. If you had this and it increased your confidence, as Denise pointed out, that there was a tornado in this area, don't you think that would help you, at least in your confidence? Or
it does. And the other thing too, what a lot of people understand, when you're out there in that green wall working a tornado outbreak like Monday night, nobody knows how hard that is. I mean, most people think any idiot can do this, and maybe they're right. But,
No.
I'm a classic example of that. But we don't have a lot of time to do analytical thinking when it comes to the science of meteorology when we're on the air. Yeah. We're identifying storms and telling people what to do and where to go and looking at all this information coming in across all these platforms. And I do agree that it's very helpful having a facets type array available to us into these graphics boxes that we use on television. I can't wait. It's going to be good. But leading up to the event, we use maps. But during the event itself, we can supplement that. But I'm just worried that people are going to see these facets graphics on their phone and not have any context of the information provided by professional meteorologists. And if they can't find their house on a map, goodness, it's a problem. And I don't know what to do about that.
I think ultimately, though, in terms of, smartphone apps and whatnot, a lot of it, I mean, the warning's not going to go away. We're still going to have the warning. And those smartphone apps are still, as they do today, alert users that you're in the warning.
But
So
they
then,
too, but
I'm
they
question.
Cody, don't they overwarn as well? I mean, that stuff you get on the phone, as far as I'm concerned, overwarns. It's no better than the warning itself. And we're overwarning in this country. I believe we're overwarning in this country.
What's the discussion
facets
around
help take care of that? I mean, facets, because you're narrowing down the worst part of that storm. But also, you know, how hard is it for us from the National Weather Service's point of view with this new program when it rolls out that a warning comes out and you click on it and it asks you to turn on your location and it pinpoints you in that warning?
Yeah.
That can't be that difficult for some smart person to figure out in this technology.
Yeah, I agree.
What's the discussion around the communication of probabilities? Because both Aubrey and Denise have said they've walked away each day going, did I communicate that right? And then you just mentioned the discussion of, well, probability was probably misinterpreted. So
I think it exclaims more uncertainty than anything to the public.
And what they're saying is that different people interpret it differently. So we would love to try and get to a standard. What's the discussion around that? And how are you possibly going to get an organization, Noah, that never wants to throw the baby out with the bathwater to make a change like that?
Do you want to take that, Cody?
And can you fix that? I mean, is that a valid question?
You're officially a federal employee, so you can take that one.
I mean, that's a pretty big concern though, right? What are you going to change to, and then how are you going to do it?
There are a lot of policy changes, like even with just the rapidly updating warning, for those that, like VTech code, which I know very little about VTech code, but I do know that current Weather Service policy does not support this concept of a rapidly updating warning and the codes that would have to be used in order to translate that warning with time. So there are a lot of policy challenges that this will face as we move towards operations.
Yeah, we don't want to just change for the sake of change. We want it to be change that's meaningful and positive. And the idea behind, there's two different things that, you know, we're talking about. One is having warnings that move along with the storm, which I think from a meteorological perspective, it seems naturally like a lovely idea to have something that moves along with it. But there are infrastructural challenges. Cody mentioned one, the VTech isn't there to support it. When would weather radios go off? They typically go off at the issuance point. Well, if you no longer have an issuance point because it's just sort of continually moving, it'll have to be something about geography or time. It won't just be about it exists, now it's over. Now it exists, now it's over. Because the storm doesn't work that way. The warning wouldn't work that way. And so we need to think about the whole communication structure differently. We've at least started to do a stakeholder engagement process to bring in people who, you know, the Midland radio people, and to bring in the Weather Service, people who do dissemination, and to bring in, you know, the performance evaluation people, because the way warnings are counted would even have to change. All of that would have to be reconsidered. We've at least started that process for warnings. But the probability piece, it's just a whole other layer. And I think the assumption going into the design of this particular product, and I should say Facets isn't just limited to this one. There are a lot of different gap-filling probabilistic products under development. But for this one in particular, the idea had been the challenge of trying to give people more time. You know, a warning just doesn't give you enough time. If you need to do more than shelter in place, it's just not sufficient to get out of there. And if you need people to do more than that, we want to give them something. I think the final form of that something is still very much in question. You all probably saw with the severe weather that happened in Alabama and Mississippi and Louisiana just a couple days ago. There was a new form experimented with that came from the Storm Prediction Center. They took the mesoscale convective discussion and they boiled down, they sort of narrowed down a very specific set of counties. In one of their MDs, it was actually something that was smaller than the warning. And they provided the same kind of qualitative context that is what these probabilities are based on. So the probability systems themselves are simulating environmental information and attributes of the storm, and they're forecasting and saying, you know, the storm is likely to continue and it's likely to strengthen. Well, it's because the environment is supportive. And so the SPC in those mesoscale convective discussions was putting that context out there and saying, you know, these couple counties we expect this storm that's heading into this area to continue because the environment is supportive. I mean, really what we're talking about fee being is just putting numbers to that. So they're trying to put something in that scale right now.
Well, Kim, in that case, particularly, you're talking about the Alexandria, Louisiana tornado. And folks, I don't know if you read the story today about the kids in the church school. They heard the warning that came, I believe, from WFO Lake Charles. They heard the warning. They heard all this stuff coming out. That was a school that was leveled. Those kids, there were 15 of them, 16 of them. They evacuated their building. They went over to the sanctuary, got underneath the pews in the sanctuary, which is more supported. The school they were in moments before was leveled. The warning from the National Weather Service and the information from the Weather Service worked.
And you know what is worth pointing out that you can't evacuate a structure if you're just going next door. It's time if you are mobile and if you have something very close. You're right. It's very worth pointing out that amount of time can be sufficient. And the Weather Service in Louisiana did a terrific job warning for that in such a way that they were able to make that choice and get out. It is wonderful that they did that because we don't know what the result would have been. Probably wouldn't have been nearly as good had they been in that school.
And there were interesting things too, Kim, about the SPC mesoscale discussions. There were a lot of tweets and everything saying, "My Lord, this thing is smaller than the warning itself." Just like Kim said, a lot of talk in the broadcaster community about it, which I think is interesting. It continues the trend, James, that we saw in southeastern Alabama.
And what we need is to get those MDs into these graphics boxes we use on television.
Yep.
They are not, to my knowledge, at least the one we have back here, which is WSI. We're about to get another one back here, but we need to get those in the system so that whoever's with me in that office can pop that MD up. That's what they do. They're back there looking at this stuff. And I got so much traffic. I don't know exactly when they release that MCD, but when the MCD comes out, you can pop it up on the air and say, if you live in a mobile home in these places, this is when you go to your safe place. You need to drive to your local community shelter. If you go to a 24/7 truck stop, whatever you do, this is when you need to do that. And I think those products are marvelous. I don't know who the lead is with SPC who's doing these things, Kim or Cody, if it's who's it, Brian or Rich? I don't even know who's taking the lead on this thing, but they're good. They are darn good.
Absolutely.
And that is that we need to be able to show that more easily on television. And again, for now, sure, we can just pop up the graphic that they produce, but it would be nice to have that in these systems. But that is, you're right. That is a great example of where this is going. And that will give us that, product between the watch and the warning that ultimately facets will cover. So I don't know who's down there doing this, but it's good.
Well, it also, James, I think it supports the warning. I mean, it's pretty obvious that this supported the warning in Alexandria, Louisiana. I think it was all about the same time, and everything was, I mean, we always say it's all local. With these tornado warnings, it's local. And and I think it really is amazing. I agree with you.
Denise, while you were there, what changed in your presentation as you were working with these things?
I guess just pinpointing cities a little bit better. But once again, I mean, it was just difficult to to compare it to what I do now, because just like Aubrey said, that week I covered more storms than I have in my entire career when it comes to tornadoes.
And so I'm sorry, go ahead.
Boston will be different. Well, I know, in the time we have remaining, I really would love to ask, if you don't mind, Kevin, the other aspect to what Denise was trying to cover was the Spanish language communication aspect. So communicating uncertainty in English, hard. What was it like trying to communicate about these products in Spanish?
It was very difficult. And, working with Joseph there, we came to realize that in the Spanish language, we don't have a lot of words to let people know, the meteorological terms. There aren't a lot of the correct translation, right? So then you have to figure out, how do you speak to your public, let them know they're in harm's way, but speak to them in just a general language and not in the meteorological terms. So that was difficult, because I'm just like, rotation, all these different kind of things, but I'm just like, okay, tornadoes headed your way. But the other thing that we haven't really talked about was the lightning probability. I know that's something, you guys are thinking about working on. And we all came to the conclusion that lightning probability is great in a place like Florida, where people are outdoors quite a bit and pretty much the entire year. But that was a good product, I thought. It just really lets who's in danger of the lightning. But anyways, going back to the Spanish side of it, it was challenging, but it was fun once again, because I think once meteorology, translating it is hard, but I don't know, you just kind of have to talk to the public the way they understand it, not based on probability, not based on science. Because on the Spanish side of things, or in the Spanish world, we don't really talk about science much on air. We just use regular words so people can understand what's going on. So it was fun.
I was going to say, let me give a shout out too, because this is a big deal in my market. Denise, we did not do an adequate job of reaching our Hispanic population on April 27, 2011. And we know we had loss of life because of that. I got to give a shout out to Shinty Rodriguez, who came in behind us Monday night and did translations on social media on the fly. Mm-hmm. She was fantastic. She has interned with us here. She finished in meteorology at Mississippi State, and we all need to do a better job.
Yes, we do.
We all need to do a better job, and I'm hoping that professionals that are listening to this or watching this are cognizant of that need, because you have Spanish-speaking individuals that are consuming your products and services that just need to hear this in their own language.
Yeah, and not only that, James, but like I see her tweet saying "Se emite vigilancia de tornado," right? So the English speakers are born knowing about weather. You guys, and I say you guys because I'm from Panama, so I didn't grow up watching weather at all. This is pretty much ingrained in your culture. In Latin America, we don't really have weather forecasters or meteorologists. So a lot of people come from different countries not even knowing what a vigilancia de tornado means, So that's when I decided I wanted to study meteorology, and my main goal was to teach the society about weather, not just tell them the weather, but teach them on air about weather. So I feel like a lot of us still need to do that, because a lot of people coming from different countries are foreign to what meteorology is about. So now we're pretty much teachers, and I know both in English and Spanish, we're always teachers, but I feel like in the Spanish side, we're teaching elementary students, while on the English side, you are dealing with a high school audience kind of thing.
Yeah, that's definitely true. So no, that's
sorry to leave you speechless.
No, it's the challenge, I think, that's caught everyone somewhat numb or mute.
So Cody, you said at the top, you watch them and you take notes. So pretend we've just met at a party and I don't know what you're doing, and you say you're watching broadcasters use new weather forecasting tools. What are the 3 things that have surprised you the most, scared you the most, given you the most interest about how the people like Aubrey and Denise are using the stuff? What are your 3 biggest surprises?
I think going into it, we got so focused on the meteorology of it that sort of my big surprise moment was when people started mentioning, but how is the crawl going to handle this?
Oh.
And we just hadn't thought about that communication aspect of it at all. We were focused on, what words are they going to use? Are they going to struggle to explain the product? And, are they going to like the colors? But, that small but very important detail had just sort of completely slipped our mind. And, that was something that came up year 1. Participant number 1 was the crawl. And so that was sort of my big surprise. What were your other 2?
Yours. What are your other? What were the biggest surprises? Name a couple.
Trying to think. one that, and it's come up more than once. It's not just an isolated participant, but you know, they like, a lot of broadcasters tend to like the visual representation of the probabilities, but they don't want any labels. They just like the gradation of color because they're able to say, this dark red, you need to seek shelter now. And those of you that are out in this pink area, you've got time. So, and you know, in the current warning system, it's, if you're in the warning, you need to seek shelter. But this gives them an opportunity to say, in this area, you need to seek shelter, but you out here, you guys still have time. If you need to run and, you know, go someplace else, it gives them that, they feel like they can communicate that to their viewers, hypothetical viewers, that they can't now.
That's really interesting though. So then is the replacement for probability nothing?
You mean like just unlabeled, just a color cue?
Yeah.
Well, so here's the thing. As a meteorologist, I love that extra information. And that's great for me, but I can't show all of that information. So that information is valuable to me. However, when I'm on air, it's too cluttered. It's too much. We've got to keep it simple to show the viewer, you know, the absolute necessary information. So information helpful for us, but cannot relay that past us, you know. And
I actually thought the gradient was very, easy to, explain to our viewers. And I thought it was really thorough. Red, you're in the danger zone. Pink, you have 20 minutes to seek shelter. So I didn't feel like it was something that we didn't need. I really felt like it was just extra information that allowed us to give our forecast a little bit better. Even going the James Band route, you could even say, hey, it's the Walmart on this street and it's headed towards, the gas station right across the street kind of thing. Because it really pinpoints rotation and where it's headed.
And I think those are so useful because earlier this year, I was on air for an hour in 2 of our West Virginia counties where on one of the counties, they don't even have roads labeled into our system. So I had 3 different maps up on other computers, and I'm doing this coverage by myself with NWS Chat Up and trying to go on air. So when you have these rural areas and you're a little bit more challenged, especially areas that maybe don't see these warnings quite as often, I can see, when you have these constant rapid updates like you guys were testing this year, those are extremely helpful because we're basically flying blind and hoping when NWS updates a warning that we can get some information, but we don't always get that extra information. And the other thing that really came up during my week at the test bed last year was lightning, because we did one simulation of a Colorado storm over a lake, and lightning struck and killed, I think, a mother and a daughter on a jet ski. And so in these high recreation areas, lightning's not even part of the warning. So how do we get that in, especially when you have national parks out west? Ellen Baca, who was also in the test bed with me, she's on the Great Lakes in Michigan. They have a lot of, laking activities. We have the Shenandoah National Park here, a lot of hiking. So how do we get lightning into some of these products to alert that danger to people?
That's a huge gap. There's very little lightning that gets out, in part because you're right, it's not part of the watch warning advisory system. We have no product for it.
And it made me realize kind of how much maybe I ignore lightning, when we have a lot of these thunderstorms and things like that. And it kind of made me a little bit more conscious of that when I came home and went back to working thunderstorms.
So let me get on a big topic here that I probably shouldn't get on here, but why not? NOAA Weather Radio. So our NOAA friends on the chat here, Kim, Cody. So Facets comes online 5 to 10 years. Is NOAA going to just give up on weather radio? It's stale. There's no storm specific warning. They're still using counties. And again, when I push, I'm just talking between us weather weenies and dweebs here. Publicly, I am all in on weather radio, but are we going to give up on that, or did we finally improve it when Facets comes out to make it something that's compatible with the new warning system?
I think based on the workshop that we had in Norman, Oklahoma back in August to discuss things like the rapidly updating warning, correct me if I'm wrong, Kim, but we were actually told that weather radio could handle a more precise warning alert, but that the necessary information isn't actually being sent out by the transmitters.
Yeah.
So there's actually more capability there that we're not tapping into right now.
Yeah,
Cody
I see some other nods.
Yeah, Cody and Kim wouldn't. I mean, it always seemed like to me that we could put GPS in weather radios, but again, like you say, Cody, it's not coming from the transmit. That's not coming from the transmitter at this point, or through the warning. But I've got to think that would be part of it, James. I would hope so. Just some kind of GPS.
Yeah, and of course, you know, when Bruce Thomas was at Midland, he said, we're ready to go with this, but we're waiting on NOAA. And NOAA's, everybody's pointing fingers here. And the problem is these things are still county-based. So you've got a tornado warning and trips your weather radio, and you're not even in the polygon. You're not even close to the polygon. The polygon's 40 miles north of you, and people get mad. They throw it out the window like a Frisbee, and they don't have it. And to me, it's a vital service because it is not linked to the cell. It is not linked to the cellular network. You know, these phones will not work many times because the cellular network is inherently unstable during severe weather, where those weather radio transmitters are high power on tall towers, independent of the cell network. I think it's a crucial service, and I think we should do everything we can to upgrade it. So I'm glad to hear
I agree
that maybe it's not going away.
Yeah, there's improvements being considered for the program. I think as a whole, it's sort of undergoing a revitalization right now, which is a very timely thing to do. As we're developing these technologies, maybe we can find ways to build some of this capability in as they're improving the infrastructure. I mean, one of the things that the weather radio providers told us is since the 90s. I mean, I think it's been 20 years. They said there's an additional code in the encoding system of weather radio that's not being used. So it's a decimal sort of thing. What it means is right now it's activating based on counties, but you could subdivide the county into 9 sections and have, St. Joseph County, part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4 that get, notified. And so there is the ability to geolocate more specifically. But again, that's the part that really relies on the tower being able to send that additional digit signal. Part of the issue here
we have to be careful though, because we don't want people having to program these things based on what segment of the county that they're in. And I got to put in a 05 or a 92, where a GPS chip would just, the weather radio would have a known location. It would be automatic for that. That's what I would like to see.
What did Bruce say that the GPS chip was going to do to the cost of a unit though?
We really didn't talk about GPS chips per se. He just said that this already has the capability to receive additional geospatial information. And so it would really, I think there'd be a programming component, as it is right now. This is already something that could be done. GPS enabling, that would be a whole other level. And Cody, you might know better from either of the nurses.
The radio has to locate itself.
Right. But I've heard, and again, Cody and Kim or James, I've heard putting GPS on a weather radio is a relatively inexpensive thing to do in 2019. I mean,
it should be. Should be. Everything has it.
Yeah, right. Bingo.
And the next thing is, why in the world haven't we put it in vehicles? Because most people die in mobile homes and cars, and you could take that weather radio signal and put it in most modern vehicles have these nice, display panels in them, and you can have some type of audible alert, not a visual where people are being distracted, just a very loud audible alert. You are now in the tornado warning polygon. You need to pull off and go to a safe place. Why haven't we done that?
Man,
it's
down.
you know, tornadoes,
That's
that's a problem,
chaos.
but flooding, people driving into flooding is actually, I mean, we kill more people doing that than from tornadoes in many years, you know, if we were to, for bang for the buck, if we could tell people that they're in a flash flood warning while they're driving, and if they see water, not to drive into it, how great would that be? Man, that'd be amazing.
We experienced fatalities here in Pennsylvania yesterday from snow squalls. We had a multi-vehicle accident, right? And it's another one of those situations. If these vehicles had GPS and they were getting online information as they were driving down Interstate 80 at 70 miles an hour, they go into a whiteout. You could save a life instantly.
Yeah.
Hey, Cody, in a world of nearly continuous updated information, what does that suggest for the distribution of that information through social media, which has defined itself as time shifting the information?
We tried to build that a little bit into our experiment. For the first couple years, it wasn't. But we tried to note the decisions of like, oh, I would tweet something. And after the first couple years, we were like, but what would people tweet? So we actually created a protected Twitter account that has no followers, that we allow our participants to then create tweets and take screen captures. One of the frustrations was that because this is a new product, you're trying to figure out what exactly to say because you're limited in your characters and you're explaining something that's more complex than what you're used to. And then, so by the time you craft this tweet and you get your screen capture, it's automatically outdated by the time you get it out there.
Right.
So
but
for
then
something that's, you know, a snapshot in time, it can get kind of difficult depending on how rapidly it's updating.
Well, because that's always been one of my arguments, is that a lot of people are going to see these data points and they're old. Not because of the time it took you to put it together, but Facebook or Twitter is going to serve it to you based upon its activity.
Right.
And you might see it 5 minutes old, an hour old, or 3 days old, or somewhere in between there. And so y'all can't control that, obviously, but it just seems like that problem becomes worse in a continuously updated information situation.
It does. And in fact, last year when Aubrey participated, we had a Facebook account as well. But every participant that came through said, you know, oh, sure, I'll use Facebook for, you know, convective outlooks, watches, longer lead time information. But when it came to warnings and things that were actively happening, they would ditch the Facebook and solely focus on Twitter because it was less at the mercy of the algorithm.
You set up the event on Facebook, and then the live event is Twitter.
But this is one of my arguments since the beginning on this, and I would love to know what you guys have researched on this, if anything, is that in doing the setup and teeing it up, you're training people that that's where the information is. And so what you're telling them is, okay, well, if it's a day out or a couple of hours out, you know, it's okay to get it here. But then when it really becomes important, you really shouldn't get it here on the social media platform. Nobody's going to know that.
Well,
we've trained them to go there.
We're at a standstill because of the way Facebook decides to do their algorithms.
Yes.
So it's up to us to put that information out there. But for people, they have to depend on the warnings, and it's up to them to pay attention as the event unfolds. They know where to find us, but we can't be on Facebook because, I mean, how many people are we really reaching during an actual event?
Right, exactly. But you are training them to go there for that information
beforehand.
So
but we're training them to think for themselves and to be self-reliant during the actual event.
We're training these people that can't find themselves on maps to decide when to turn the trigger between listening on Facebook and going somewhere else.
They have to go to the TV, or they have to go. Now, granted, not many people are on Twitter that are on Facebook. A lot of people don't have the same thing, but it's one of, you put the information out there and they're going to have to pay attention. If they really care about their safety and their family's safety, they're going to have to pay attention.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, I can't handhold everyone.
No,
Yeah, and it could be-
I admitted a short time ago, I lost this battle. We shouldn't have gone there, but we did. And now we're far too entrenched. But at the same time, this is my job, is to point that out. It was wrong going in. I don't know how to back out. I don't think we probably can, but it needs to be brought up because it was wrong.
I mean, there is some good news here. And it is interesting that I know you guys are probably facing pressure from station management to be on all the social media platforms, even during live weather. But the social science research is showing us that persistently people are receiving warning information and following on television and through cell phone apps and things like that. And social media is not remotely a primary source of warning information. So if the concern is about dependence, the good news there is that there are very few people, I think, who are relying on social media as the way that they'll get that information. It might be a way that it's shared. It might be a way that people become aware. That said, it's interesting that you do raise this issue of dependence, and what you guys are facing is this, right when you're the most time constrained is when it's probably going to be hardest for you to be on social media. I'm trying to think. I think it was a South Carolina service assessment, either Joaquin or another flooding event there. But the assessment looked at social media, and they found that there were a bunch of emergency managers who tried to do a whole lot of direct outreach to their communities via social media, had a lot of followers, and during the event, they were fielding a bunch of questions on their social media that went unanswered by members of the public, people who were looking to be rescued, people who were asking questions about evacuation routes and things like that. And no one was there to answer the phone. And that was actually one of the key findings of that assessment was, if that's going to be a channel that people can't rely on when it's a critical time, then maybe people shouldn't, maybe you should do something to communicate to people. They can't rely on that channel during that moment. So, it's maybe not something that for severe convective warnings, for you as broadcasters, that might not be the primary channel through which people are accessing you. But if you're an emergency manager out there, you might want to go read that service assessment and take Kevin's point to heart, that if you can't be staffed and really functional and there and fully present on your social media, just having a big presence to have a big presence can possibly backfire if people are counting on you being there to answer the call through that channel.
Well, I perfectly explain, in a Facebook post, if a watch is issued, hey, here's the watch on Facebook, but don't, you're going to have to rely on a source for your warnings, because I'm not going to be posting the warnings because I'm on air, and I do it every single time.
Right. And the way I do it, and I tell everybody in all these platforms, when this thing starts, you need to watch the live. I want you watching on your phone, and this is how you can do that. I'm not going to be able to push a lot of information across all these social media channels. Everything I do, my main effort is going to be focused on being coherent on the video stream and on television. But I will say this, I am reaching, I've used these other platforms, and I've said this before, Twitter in my market is the least important, just about the least important. I know everybody in the weather world, we get on weather Twitter and we think everybody's on Twitter. Most people aren't on Twitter. In my market, the most crucial platform next to Facebook by far is what? Instagram. It's not even close. And so I'm pushing all this preliminary information before the event across all these platforms, including Snapchat and TikTok. And people say, I don't have time to screw around with the TikTok and the Snapchat. Well, that's where the kids are. And my question is a life precious? If they're 15 or 16 or 17, my position is yes. But for all these platforms, I drive them back to the live video stream or the television side. If you don't want to watch television, this is how you can watch us. And I think Kevin is right. I don't do a lot during the event on Facebook because people might see it in 5 days or something. There's no telling. And by the way, we have to take a break here, y'all. We've been going. We started early, and we're going to get out on time, so we got 10 more minutes here. So let's take a very quick break. very quick break for Tony Rice, and we're going to come back and we're just going to do picks of the week and wrap it up here. So everybody be thinking of a weather-related pick of the week. This can be website, data site, hardware, software, anything like that. So let's take a break for Tony Rice and the Astronomy Report. We'll come back with picks of the week as WeatherBrains rolls along.
Looking beyond the atmosphere, here's Tony Rice with your Astronomy Outlook.
Continuing the holiday theme from last week's WeatherBrains and the Gemini 6 astronauts version of Jingle Bells, the first Christmas spent in space by NASA astronauts was Apollo 8, the first crewed mission to the moon and the first humans to orbit another world. It was launched on December 21st, 1968, and splashed down on December 27th. This was 1968, one of the most tumultuous single years in history. It was marred by the assassinations of Martin Luther King Jr. and Robert F. Kennedy, as well as violent protest and police responses in Chicago, New York, and around the world. Astronauts Frank Borman, Jim Lovell, and Bill Anders were determined to make the best use they knew how of the platform they had on Christmas Eve, especially once they were told that they'd have the largest audience ever to listen to the human voice. As the command module orbited above the lunar surface, the astronauts beamed back images of the moon and Earth and took turns reading from the book of Genesis. Lovell explained, the first 10 verses of Genesis are the foundation of many of the world's religions, not just Christianity. And that's how it came to pass. The mission also produced the iconic Earthrise image, snapped by Anders as their capsule came around the far side of the moon, revealing a half-lit Earth. That image was later enhanced in 2013, using detailed maps of the moon's surface from data gathered from NASA's Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter and the Lunar Atmosphere and Dust Environment Explorer, better known as LADEE. It was all sent back to Earth on a laser beam by the Lunar Laser Communication Demonstration System. As the crew of Apollo 8 left lunar orbit on Christmas morning, Mission Control waited anxiously for word that the engine bird was successful and that they were on their way home. They got their answer when Lovell radioed, "Roger, please be informed that there is a Santa Claus." That's your Astronomy Outlook.
And from the crew of Apollo 8, we close with good night, good luck, a Merry Christmas, and God bless all of you on the good Earth.
I get chill bumps listening to that. Goodness.
I remember that. Boy, I remember that.
I was 12 years old. I watched that stuff like a hawk. My mama would let me stay home from school to watch, and that was just remarkable on that Christmas Eve in 1968. All right, so let's quit talking old memories here, and let's go through picks of the week. Everybody's going to share something that is weather-related, and let's start with Kev. Kev, we've not had a pick from you in a long time, so go.
Well, I'll stay on my social media rant. This is a podcast I've mentioned. Well, I know.
We get the breaking news jingle.
Kim was the one that taught me this. Kim said to me a long time ago, she said, you just have to keep saying your thoughts, your ideas, and eventually it will take hold. So it's Kim's fault. But this is a podcast called Your Undivided Attention. And the specific episode is the one that I will link to. It is a fascinating discussion with one of the people involved in the Cambridge Analytica bit and Facebook. And they go into pretty deep detail into what they're doing to target you and how they are possibly manipulating you. And it's a really, really interesting thing.
And all of these picks will be on the website, weatherbrains.com. So let's go to Aubrey for her pick of the week.
So mine is the service assessment. I saw Ricky Matthews tweet this out yesterday. It's a service assessment from the Missouri derecho, the duck boat accident. The service assessment came out, and I haven't gone through the whole thing yet. I got about a quarter of the way through it, but it talks about phasing out the severe weather statements, which is kind of interesting as far as updating severe storm warnings and tornado warnings. So excited to read the rest of it, but that service assessment is out.
Awesome. My pick of the week, it is a piece in the the Palm Beach Post. Would you believe lightning can help us know if a storm will intensify? And this is some research based on Dorian and tropical systems and the lightning mapper, and very interesting results. So while we are in the middle of the cold season, that gives you something to think about for the warm season. Dr. John, what's your pick of the week?
My pick is, I got a couple actually, but the one I want to show you is video from the tornado that struck, I think it was Columbia, Mississippi. So I'm going to share the video with you right now. I'll put just a couple of seconds of this. You'll see the tornado come across the highway, strike this auto collision center, flattens the tent right away, but then watch this vortex come across.
Wow.
Is that amazing? This is a surveillance camera at the center there. So that's my pick. Dramatic.
Wow.
footage.
Wow.
So that was
right,
dark
Troy,
red bloom, right, Cody?
All right, Troy, what you got for us?
Well, I'll give a little plug to our colleagues and friends over at the FAA. Some of you may be aware that through the years, the FAA, especially in the state of Alaska, has incorporated a lot of weather cams at airports up there. We're so critical, and aviation is so important in the state of Alaska. They have actually now begun, and they're working on getting some of it ironed out, but they actually are now setting up an aviation cam site for the U.S. as well. It's AVC or avcamsplus.faa.gov. And I've sent the link. I think, where it centers on Austin. Guess what? You all get to be centered on Austin if you want to look at my pick of the week. But they don't really have that many cameras set up yet in the U.S., but you have a chance to look at METAR observations on this and everything else. So I think it's kind of cool, and the hat's off to our friends in the FAA tonight.
Awesome. Good deal. All right, Kim, what you got for us this week?
So my pick this week is a bit of news about the Vortex Southeast program. And this was the program that actually brought me to the IWT in James's neck of the woods a week ago. This program has received, if this budget gets passed, there's been a bipartisan agreement on the federal budget. The program has been doubled in its funding. So that could bring a whole host of new activities to the Southeast if that makes it through to the president's desk and gets signed.
Yep. Awesome. All right. So Cody and Denise, we have stalled long enough for both of you two. So Denise, do you have anything that could be a pick of the week this week?
I don't think so. I'm not sure.
How about don't make me blow the foghorn. How about your Twitter account?
What happened to my Twitter account? Just to look at it. See
that could be your pick. That could be your pick of the week.
Oh, sure. But
this is called shameless self-promotion.
I don't even know how to do that, James. I'm still trying to figure out this Zoom thing on my phone.
All right. Well, I'll break out the foghorn. It's okay.
Technology is tough sometimes.
It is. I'm not techie. I'm people are like, you're millennial, but I am just not techie oriented. I don't have Alexa. I don't have Google, whoever. I don't care for those things. I don't want anyone listening to me.
They already are anyways.
I don't have Google, whoever. That's a good show title. All right. Cody, come up with something good for us.
I have something good. Essentially, hazardous weather testbed season has started. So we currently have application calls out for National Weather Service forecasters. Those close on January 3rd. The testbed has a Twitter account. It is at NOAA_HWT. And there will be a second round of applications that will include, I think, a broadcaster a week for the GOES and JPSS satellite experiment. So that second announcement that comes out shortly after the AMS annual meeting will include opportunities for broadcasters as well.
How do you find those? Just on the Twitter?
So typically the communication chain is we go through the National Weather Service regions and it trickles down to the weather forecast offices, and then the warning coordination meteorologists send that out to their email lists. But we also now have the Twitter account and broadcast opportunities. I always send those out through @KFI_TV on Twitter as well.
And one last very important question for Cody. In the test bed experiments, who did better, Aubrey or Denise?
Before Cody, yeah. Wow.
I had no idea that we had a Survivor thing going on, Cody. That would really spice things up.
We can leave it to Kevin.
I love you
Wow.
both. I love you all.
All right, so we're going to wrap this up. So for those that are fans of watching or listening live, we will not have a live program the week of Christmas. That's what this program is. We will be back the week after Christmas. So the next show will be on Monday, December 30th at the regular time. That's 8:30 Central, 9:30 Eastern. Greg Carbon of WPC, the beloved Greg Carbon.
The man, the myth, the legend.
The famous Greg Carbon will be on with his meteorological memories. And the challenge for Greg, you know, he's always done the biggest weather events of the year. I hope he does the biggest weather events of the decade, because we're about to roll over to 2020. So if Greg is listening, or I'll try and shoot him an email, hopefully he can do that as well. So let's wrap this thing up. Cody, thank you so much for coming on the show this week. And Denise, thank you for your time.
You're very welcome.
Thank you for having us.
Denise, do you keep up with baseball at all by any chance?
Yes, I do. Sports.
So is Mookie Betts staying or leaving?
Oh, I don't know. I think he's leaving.
Oh,
that's baseball brains. You guys go do that over on that show.
Yeah. All right. So we got to wrap this thing up again. We're typically on the air Monday nights at 8:30 Central, 9:30 Eastern. The email address here, it is email@weatherbrains.com. Aubrey will be back with an email segment on the next show. Our social media accounts are on the website, weatherbrains.com, along with the show notes, weatherbrains.com. So that's going to wrap it up for this week. To all of you, happy holidays, Merry Christmas. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you after Christmas. Have a great week, and God bless everybody. Thanks, everybody. This was
Thanks for coming on, ladies. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Cody.
Great.
Yeah.
Good to see you again, Cody.
Can't believe it was an hour, 30 minutes. Wow, that's crazy.
Amazing, right?
Yeah.
Amazing.
No commercials.
In the morning.
No commercials on this show.